There are two kinds of silence in baseball. The silence of a player who has nothing to say. And the silence of a player who has been waiting, carefully, deliberately, with the patience of someone who understands that words land harder when they are chosen rather than scattered, for exactly the right moment to speak. Shohei Ohtani chose the second kind. For weeks, the questions had been building. Reporters circling. Analysts speculating. The baseball world quietly obsessing over the situation surrounding Roki Sasaki, his habits, his preparation, the whispered concerns that had begun leaking from people close to the situation about whether the young pitcher was managing himself with the discipline that his talent demands. Nobody expected Ohtani to address it. He is not a player who inserts himself into narratives that don't belong to him. He is not a player who speaks publicly about teammates' private struggles. He is careful. Measured. Deeply respectful of the line between honest concern and public interference. But then he spoke. And what he said was not dramatic. It was not an attack. It was not the headline-grabbing controversy that social media immediately tried to turn it into. It was something far more powerful than that. It was the truth, delivered with the quiet authority of a man who has lived everything he was describing. And then, within hours of breaking that silence, Ohtani walked into Game 2 against the Cardinals and unleashed something that the stadium was completely unprepared for. This is both stories. And why they are impossible to separate. To understand why Ohtani's comments about Sasaki carried the weight that they did, you have to understand the context in which they were delivered. This was not a press conference designed around controversy. This was not a carefully orchestrated media moment built to generate headlines. Ohtani was asked a direct question, the kind of question that most athletes deflect with a smile and a non-answer, and he chose, for reasons that say everything about his character, to answer it honestly. The concerns around Sasaki had been circulating for several weeks. Questions about his sleep schedule. Questions about his off-field habits and whether they reflected the kind of disciplined lifestyle that sustains elite pitching performance over a long, brutal major league season. Questions about whether the adjustment from Japanese professional baseball to the major league environment had created gaps in his preparation that were beginning to show. These are not small questions. For a pitcher of Sasaki's age and talent level, habits formed now will define the ceiling of his career. The window for building the foundational disciplines that sustain greatness is not unlimited, and people close to Ohtani understood that he knew this better than almost anyone. When asked about Sasaki directly, Ohtani did not deflect. He spoke about the importance of sleep as a non-negotiable foundation of elite athletic performance. He spoke about how the body's recovery systems, the processes that repair muscle tissue, consolidate motor memory, and regulate the hormonal balance that determines competitive readiness, cannot function properly without consistent, disciplined rest. He spoke about nutrition timing. About how what a pitcher consumes in the 18 hours before he takes the mound is not separate from his performance on it, it is a direct input into that performance, as measurable and as consequential as the quality of his mechanics or the sharpness of his breaking ball. And he spoke, carefully, without naming specifics, about the difference between a young player who treats preparation as a burden and a young player who treats it as the foundation of everything he is trying to build. He did not say Sasaki was failing. He did not criticize. He did not perform concern for the cameras. He simply described, from his own experience, with the authority of someone who had built his entire career on exactly these principles, what elite preparation actually looks like. And he left the audience to draw its own conclusions about the distance between that standard and what had been observed. It was the most honest thing anyone had said publicly about the situation. And the baseball world stopped and listened. Here is what makes Ohtani's comments genuinely significant, beyond the immediate news cycle, beyond the social media reaction, beyond the takes that will be generated and forgotten within 48 hours. Ohtani earned the right to say what he said. Not because of his statistics. Not because of his contract. Not because of his MVP awards or his World Series ring or his status as the most complete baseball player on the planet. He earned the right because he lived it. The discipline Ohtani was describing when he spoke about Sasaki is not theoretical knowledge. It is not something he read in a sports science textbook or absorbed from a nutritionist's presentation. It is the product of a personal transformation that began in high school, when a teenager in Hanamaki made decisions about sleep, food, and preparation that his peers considered extreme and that history has since validated completely. Ohtani understands what it costs to build that foundation. He understands the specific discomfort of choosing discipline over comfort at an age when comfort feels like a reasonable option. He understands the gap between a player who is talented enough to survive without elite preparation and a player who is disciplined enough to become genuinely great with it. That understanding, earned through years of personal investment, is what gave his words about Sasaki a weight that no analyst or coach could have replicated. When Ohtani speaks about preparation, he is not offering an opinion. He is offering a blueprint. And then came Game 2. There is something almost cinematic about the sequence of events, Ohtani breaking his silence on one of the most discussed situations in baseball, generating a wave of conversation and reaction, and then walking into Dodger Stadium that same evening and delivering a performance that made everything he had said feel like a prophecy rather than a comment. The Cardinals arrived for Game 2 carrying the confidence of a team that had already proven it could win in this environment. Game 1 had given them belief. Their preparation had been thorough. Their game plan was sound. They were ready. They were just not ready for what Ohtani was about to do. The first 3 innings of Game 2 told a familiar story. The Cardinals' pitching was sharp. The Dodgers were patient but quiet. The score remained close, a chess match played at the highest level, each team refusing to give the other anything comfortable to work with. And Ohtani was watching. This is something that gets lost in the highlight reels and the home run celebrations. Before Ohtani destroys a pitcher, he studies him. Every at-bat, even the unproductive ones, even the called strikes and the foul balls and the walks, is a data collection exercise. He is building a picture. Identifying the release point. Mapping the movement patterns. Finding the one pitch, in the one location, at the one count where the pitcher's execution is most likely to be imperfect. By the 4th inning, Ohtani had seen enough. The Cardinals pitcher delivered a fastball that was, by any objective standard, a quality pitch. Well located. Good velocity. The kind of pitch that retires 95% of major league hitters without drama. Ohtani is not 95% of major league hitters. The swing was instantaneous and absolute. There was no hesitation, no adjustment, no visible moment of decision-making, because the decision had already been made 3 at-bats ago, in the quiet processing that happens behind Ohtani's eyes while the rest of the world sees only a man standing in a batter's box. The baseball traveled in a way that silenced the Cardinals' dugout before it even landed. Dodger Stadium erupted. But Ohtani was already rounding first base, head down, pace measured, expression unchanged, as if what had just happened was not a moment of extraordinary individual brilliance but simply the logical outcome of adequate preparation meeting available opportunity. That is the part that is hardest to explain about Ohtani. The absence of surprise in his body language after his greatest moments. Because for him, genuinely, not performatively, there is no surprise. He prepared for this. He expected this. The result confirmed the process, and the process is all he was ever focused on. What Ohtani's 4th inning home run did to the Cardinals was not just change the scoreboard. It changed the atmosphere inside their dugout in a way that is impossible to fully recover from within the same game. There is a specific psychological weight that settles over a team when they have executed their game plan correctly, when they have thrown the right pitches, made the right decisions, done everything their preparation told them to do, and still watched the baseball disappear over the fence. It creates doubt. Not panic, doubt. A quiet, corrosive question that spreads through a pitching staff and a defensive unit and a lineup simultaneously. What else can we do? That doubt is what made the middle innings of Game 2 so damaging for the Cardinals. They continued competing, their character is not in question, but the edge that had defined their performance in Game 1 had been blunted. Pitchers who had been hitting their spots began missing by inches. Hitters who had been patient began chasing. Defenders who had been sharp began hesitating. Ohtani had not just hit a home run. He had broken something in the Cardinals' belief system that the final 6 innings could not repair. The Dodgers capitalized. Methodically. Without drama. Exactly the way a team with Ohtani's standard of preparation capitalizes on an opponent's doubt. Final score, Dodgers. Game 2 belonged to Los Angeles. Brutally. Completely. So what does this night actually mean? It means that Ohtani's silence on Sasaki was not accidental, and his performance in Game 2 was not separate from it. Both came from the same place. The same philosophy. The same iron-disciplined belief that preparation is not a supporting character in the story of elite performance. Preparation is the story. The home run was just the moment the audience saw it. Sasaki, wherever he is, whatever adjustments he makes in the coming weeks, now has something more powerful than a coaching session or a nutritionist's report. He has a blueprint. Delivered publicly, honestly, and without agenda, by the one player in baseball whose results make that blueprint impossible to argue with. The Cardinals have a series to save. The Dodgers have momentum that feels almost structural at this point. And Ohtani has said what he needed to say, both in words and in the only language that truly matters at this level.